Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lee Perry, and I have a very special guest named Christy Folk, who I'm interviewing today, a fellow climate activist who, I'm just really inspired by, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Christy Folk, and I identify as a climate activist, among other things. And what else do you want to know about me?
Well, I want to know first where you came from, your background, and kind of why you call yourself a climate activist.
Okay, so like the origin story. Okay, so I was born in Orlando, raised in Kissimmee, Florida. Now I'm back in Orlando working again. I went down to college in South Florida. Um, at FAU, so FAU Honors College in Jupiter, Florida, and got a degree in environmental science. So that's my background. And then before that, kind of rewinding in high school and middle school, I was always part of the environmental clubs and the eco club, green team. It had various names at various places, um, all the levels of schooling. And if I go back even farther before that, my parents are both wildlife biologists. And so it kind of runs in the family for me to be a scientist and to take off after them. And they've always, raised me with these sustainable values. And so that's kind of what got me started on the journey to being a climate activist. And then everything that I learned in college, especially, um, getting deeper into it and learning more, and then to where we are today. I mean, I could go more in depth with that, my journey into climate activism, but
Well,
I'll
it
save that.
always inspires me when people who are young and kind of just getting their feet wet in their career are like taking time outside of themselves to kind of go in a direction of advocacy because they're passionate about certain things. And I just think that it's a really awesome part of our culture and being an American that we have this ability to come together and like organize for things that we believe in. And so I'd love to hear like your story and kind of how you came to become that climate activist today.
Okay, yeah. So I would say one of the organizations that I got involved with earlier on was 350.org. And I guess it kind of started. So I'll start where I am right now and rewind. I think that makes the most sense to go reverse chronological order. So right now I'm with the organization Fridays for Future Orlando, and so we help organize climate strikes in Orlando amidst other campaigns for the climate and for environmental causes here in the area of Central Florida and really all over. So how did I get to Fridays for Future Orlando, you may ask? I got in contact with Ideas for Us, which Fridays for Future Orlando is related to another sustainability organization in Orlando. I got in touch with for Us through a summit that I went to, a youth climate summit in Miami, hosted by Zero Hour in the summer of July 29 or in July 2019. And so that was kind of my entry point into climate activism and how I got connected to the people in Orlando who were doing it. And at that time, Fridays for Future Orlando was pretty young. It had just started in, I believe, March of 2019 was the first organized climate strike. And so I got involved with that summit because previous to that, I was in college and I had started to get involved with climate activism with 350.org. And so that was earlier on in my college career that I came to find out about Bill McKibben and his work as the leader of 350.org. And that organization is one of the leading nonprofits in, I guess, the United States, and they work internationally too, that really focuses on bringing awareness about climate change and really pushing for policies and action on climate change. And so I learned about them and got involved as a supporter, just as a member. So I have been getting their emails since 2015 and learned about climate striking and everything through them as well. And back when I've sort of always been interested in environmentalism and climate activism, but back in my early years of college, and especially like the end of high school, early college was like 2014, 2015. the whole climate strike movement that Greta Thunberg started, this Fridays for Future um, movement that she started, didn't exist yet. And so I remember I would attend these other marches and rallies that didn't have to do with climate change, that had to do with like school standards or the Women's March or something. And I would be the only one there with my climate change sign. It was a bright pink, hot pink sign. And so I just like stood out in the sea of faces and other signs. And so I started doing my own climate strikes within other movements, and I just wanted to bring awareness because I didn't see kind of the large scale movement that I saw in other kind of other issues. And so, and then the Fridays for Future movement evolved, and climate striking became a thing. And I was like, I did that already, just in other capacities. And so I can just bring what I was doing before to now the climate scene. And it really took off after the March for Our Lives events and following strikes and the marches that went on in DC and everything, because that was actually what I think some of the prominent climate activists said they were inspired by the March for Our Lives movement and everything. And that was unfortunately another event that the Parkland shooting happened pretty close to my college, and it affected some of the people I'm pretty close with, like my roommate. And so that was something that was it reverberated a lot in my community in college. And so I remember thinking something that I think Greta actually later came out with, saying that when the March for Our Lives movement happened, I was thinking, why isn't this happening for the climate crisis? Why aren't we, if only we could have a climate march of this scale,
right?
Not knowing that was going to happen like a few years later. But I remember thinking, like, this needs to happen. And of course it has now. And there were millions or however many who came out for those climate strikes for Fridays for Future. Especially the September 2019, I think, was one of the larger, or if not the largest, environmental movement, where we just had millions of people worldwide striking. But so it was 350.org that I credit with my initial entry into really the climate activism movement, and then 0 Hour actually connecting me to Ideas for Us and the local organizing in Orlando, since I moved back home to Orlando after college, and after I served a year in AmeriCorps and CCC, the National Civilian Community Corps, which is like a traveling organization. So like I would travel all over to different states in the southeastern United States to do different projects every month or so. And it was crazy. it was I learned a whole lot and went a lot of places and saw a lot and got a lot of life experience. And so I came back home to Orlando after that and have been working here ever since. But
yeah. Well, tell me about your online strikes.
Okay. Yeah. So as we all know, a lot of things pivoted online for the pandemic, and I would give Greta Thunberg kudos for relatively quickly pivoting the Fridays for Future movement online in terms of climate strikes. Pretty much like maybe a day or two after the initial coronavirus shutdown announcements. Like they organized and pivoted online and said, we can't meet in person for strikes anymore. It's not safe. We need to follow the guidelines of the CDC and the World Health Organization and everything. And so the climate strike moved online. And so what she was asking everyone to do, since our branch of Fridays for Future Orlando kind of takes our cues from the overall Fridays for Future movement, and like Greta is like our leader, kind of. So we saw that the strikes were online, and so she was asking everyone to use the hashtag climate strike online, and to post a photo online of them holding up their climate strike sign, where they would have had the strike, or at home, where they're not exposing themselves to other people for risking the virus and things like that. And so at that time, I had just started climate striking in person. trying to go almost on a weekly basis. And so it wasn't quite a weekly basis. I had only done maybe 6 or 7 in-person strikes, and a few of them were the large scale ones that we organized together, but a few of them were also just me going by myself to City Hall with my sign. And so when the pandemic hit, I also shifted my climate striking online and would post a photo of me with I decided to use my whiteboard and just write a different message every week. I also have a sign that I created that matches my Lorax outfit, which I wear for my climate strikes.
Yes, the first time I met you, you were in the Lorax outfit, and I was like, I need to be friends with that person.
Yes, so a lot of people know me as the Lorax, and then they meet me later and then realize who I am, and it blows their mind.
I do remember that moment of like, you're the Lorax? Like, yeah.
I remember that too. I remember when everyone realizes that.
Yeah.
It's a fun time.
So
But yeah, so the sign that I had initially made, I used like all recycled materials. So I used an old foam like tri-fold board from like a middle school project or something that I had under my bed, and then I used a bunch of felt and like paper that I had in like my craft supplies. And so I worked on creating this sign that says, unless now I have to think about what it says. Unless our elected officials care enough to act, nothing is going to get better. That's a fact. And so it was kind of a parody of the Lorax by Dr. Seuss, and the line that says, "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not." And so I was I was raised on the Lorax, and it means so much to me. And so that was kind of the inspiration for my climate strike outfit, go-to outfit, and sign. But I I used that sign as well. And then I also used my whiteboard because I could reuse it and I could just change and write whatever I wanted on it. And I thought that would be cool to think of like a different topic or a different issue that was relevant to kind of track what was happening that week, specifically in the climate movement, or just like something like a petition or like a call to action or some kind of educational piece that would keep me accountable and keep me inside the climate activism sphere and connected, but also like just telling other people about this and like keeping their minds on it, and reminding them that this isn't a problem that's just going to go away or something we should just ignore. It's something we should care about, and that there are things that people are doing about it, and that you can participate and take action. And so that was really the goal with the climate strikes online, and I'm still doing them weekly. And I also just did a climate strike today in person, and we're starting to do those again.
Yay.
And so that's fun.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so was there a moment of like an epiphany? I need to do this. Or was it just you were raised around, kind of progressive minded people who just all took action in their own ways and then you eventually gravitated towards your own? Or did you just wake up one day and say, that's it? Like, I have to do something.
Right. Well, I pretty much always felt very connected to nature and felt like environmental issues were important, just given my parents and their connection to nature. And they used to take me to national parks when I was a kid, and we would do road trips all over, and that was super fun, fond memories. And then my mom showed me An Inconvenient Truth, the documentary by Al Gore, and that came out when I was in 5th grade. I'm dating myself. And that really kind of jump started my baby climate activism, my environmental activism, I'll call it that, because I saw what was being talked about in that documentary, and this idea of greenhouse gas emissions cause global warming that's heating our planet, and we need to do something about it. And I remember being so perplexed. I was under the illusion that most of our energy when I was in 5th grade already came from renewables, and that yeah, we don't use that many fossil fuels, right? Like, renewables are great. Why is this a problem? And then I would later come to learn in college just the expanse of how reliant we are on fossil fuels and everything. But so that was kind of the initial aha moment, I think, was just seeing an inconvenient truth. And then the result of that for me was being obsessed with recycling. And one thing I remember in middle school was that I was sort of bullied by the other kids because I loved recycling so much. They would like throw away recyclables and just like try to upset me and like make fun of me and things like that. But it was my way to, I don't know, it was a passion that I could latch onto. And so that was the initial aha moment. And then the other aha moment was um, when I started calling myself a climate activist. And that was after the 0 Hour Summit, Youth Climate Summit in Miami. And there was a session where Jamie Margolin, who's one of the founders of 0 Hour, was doing an overall session. And I think she mentioned you are now a climate ambassador. You're now a climate activist. You've joined the movement. And I feel like, wow, I at the time I was like, wow, now I can actually start. It was like an invitation to start calling myself a climate activist, which I to that point hadn't, even though I was studying environmental science in college and just striking basically by myself amidst other strikes and marches. And so that was kind of the permission that was given to me to start calling myself a climate activist and striking and doing these additional campaign measures once I got involved with Fridays for Future Orlando and everything. But yeah, those two moments were pretty important.
Did you ever feel kind of like lonely or isolated in your advocacy? Like you said, you even striked like downtown by yourself, or your symbolism behind doing the online strikes every Friday to hold yourself accountable. Do you ever have moments where you just feel like, man, am I in this alone?
Yeah, I definitely have felt that various times. I would say the first time I felt that was in the early days of my activism. I think I must have been a freshman in college, um, where I wrote a parody. So something I do is write parody songs.
I love. Actually, I just watched a couple of them with my boyfriend the
Oh,
other night,
that's
and it
so
was
funny.
so much fun.
Oh man, I do have a few on YouTube, and I have a parody blog where I write
Yay.
some of the lyrics. But yeah, so um, I write parodies, songs to help me kind of process emotions and kind of document what I'm thinking or how I'm feeling in response to something. So basically, therapy or like a coping mechanism. And so they're also satirical in the way that parody songs traditionally are. And so I had written a song, a parody about my climate frustration when I was, I guess, a freshman in college. Um, and this parody was voicing my climate rage. And that's what I'd call it now. At the time, I would just call it frustration. And that was kind of I guess, the earliest of my climate rage. And it was just pure frustration at what I thought was universal apathy toward this issue that I had come to know and care so much about. And it was just expressing my frustration at people who were denying climate change was real at the time. Global warming was the term that we used. And just angry at just people for not caring. And I think it also was rage that came out of those early middle school years where all of my classmates would just make fun of me for recycling and caring about the environment. And so that was kind of one moment that I did feel alone in my climate rage and felt like I was the only one who cared about the planet and that there were so many issues that needed our attention and yet nobody was paying any attention to them. And so that was one moment that I felt lonely in the movement. before it was really a movement in the climate strike movement.
Mhm.
And then, but I think I stopped feeling lonely probably, honestly, this past year. And oddly, the pandemic was also good for connection online, which, like, Zoom was not a thing that we used very often
Yeah.
before the pandemic. And I mean, I think I actually had used Zoom a few times for climate organizing online for some like Future Coalition or something,
Yeah.
some events that I attended. But other than like once or twice, I don't think I had used Zoom on a weekly basis that I have since the beginning of the pandemic now. And so that was able to connect me through also online conferences. I've attended so many online conferences since
Yeah.
the beginning of the pandemic for climate, for environmental activism, for even other things like just personal hobbies like Broadway Con, which was online this past year, and I got to go for the first time.
Yay. Oh, yeah, that's right. You're big on musicals.
I do love
We need
musicals.
Climate Change the musical.
Oh
I think
yeah,
we need that.
I was gonna write it, and I had a bunch of ideas, and then it just never happened.
Well, we got to do
But
it.
maybe it'll happen.
gotta
It's a
do
fringe
it.
show. It'll be at the Orlando Fringe Festival, a
Yes.
musical.
Yes. Yes. Let's do it.
Climate Crisis, the musical.
Yes.
But yeah, so I felt a lot less connected when I started actually, I guess, networking internationally through these climate gatherings and conferences that I attended, and like just meeting and talking to and having conversations with people on the other side of the planet who are also climate activists. And I
Yeah.
think that was really the moment where I realized I'm not alone in this fight, and that we really need to think of it as a global issue because we are all affected, especially people in the global south, and the people who are the most vulnerable, of course, are the least culpable in causing the problem. And so just getting to know other people worldwide made me feel like I may be the only one in Orlando who is climate striking, but there are people all over the place who also care and are doing the same work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think sometimes the advocacy can really kind of become part of your identity and who you are and help channel things. Like one of the things that you had said about holding yourself accountable, there must be a feeling there. I know I personally struggle with climate anxiety. There's a feeling there that I'm sure you're working through in your activism, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think I felt it early on, and that I think was one of the reasons why I became, for example, so obsessed with recycling in middle school, is because I realized it was a problem and kind of took it on, like took on the burden of the climate activism at a young age, and was just like, we need to recycle everything. And that was kind of the route that I took with it, and would later understand that recycling is actually not as great as it seemed, and that it gets so much more complex, and that the complexity of the issue, all of the issues, is what just the average people don't understand. But even not knowing that complexity, I definitely have felt climate anxiety at times. And I am somebody who not likes to have, but tends to have these little existential crises, in terms of just like, what am I doing with my life? Or like, what is the purpose of life? I think that kind of thing a lot, and just like thinking philosophically. And so the idea of like, what are we as individuals meant to do in this larger scheme of climate activism? And so I think a lot of what drives my actions isn't so much fear or anxiety, but just like I've learned in the past few years how to wield my climate rage. And I think that's something that was so important, because I started in my reflections in college, it started in college, I realized I felt a lot of anger, and that I didn't really know the source of the anger or like why it was there, but I started figuring out how to use it, and I would use it as motivation. And so then I eventually learned how to like channel my anger into my activism, and I feel like that's so important because anger as an emotion, I feel like we're taught to repress our emotions, and we're taught to, just be like calm humans that just work and do whatever and like not be emotional creatures that we are, and that life is so emotional, and anger I think is such a great tool that you can use. It's like a source of energy to like drive social change. I mean, like personally with motivation, like I get angry, I work, and I get stuff done as a result. And so I'm a fan of using anger for good, and anger toward whether it's fossil fuel companies that are destroying our planet for profit, or just a variety of sources that make me angry and fuel my climate fight.
Well, in closing, like what is next for you? Where do you see yourself going in your career or just in your personal goals for yourself?
Right. So the goal kind of that's always been on the back burner, of course, right now is grad school, since I got my bachelor's. And I've been kind of trying to figure out my whole life what field. Obviously, I know I'm in the environmental fields and the sciences, but where exactly in that field I fit in terms of a career. But due to the current situation we're in, given that we have a carbon budget of like 6 years, which is, I'll just briefly explain what that is. If we keep using fossil fuels and emitting greenhouse gases at the rate that we're currently emitting, we only have 6 years before we can no longer achieve the target of, for example, 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming above pre-industrial levels, which the IPCC recommends is something we should strive for to prevent, catastrophic climate change and runaway feedback loops and things like that. So basically, we have a very short period of time to change our society and entirely. And so I feel like given that we've pushed it off so long collectively, that I'm pushing off grad school for now. I'm procrastinating on that and just trying to focus on being a climate activist right now, I guess, and figuring out how I can use my work as a means to the end of being a climate activist and helping contribute to changes that need to be made now, rather than trying to invest in a future that's not going to look anything like we expect. Things are changing. The planet is changing so rapidly that it's like what some kids say is like, why should I go to school to learn about a planet that's not gonna exist anymore? And it's kind of a grim thought. It's like, why plan for the future when we don't have a future? But it's more so for me, it's just like I don't see an end goal. I just see this is what has to happen right now, and I'm living in the moment and doing what I can as a climate activist to make people aware and hopefully make change happen.
Do you ever see yourself running for office?
I don't. Somebody told me this the other day on Facebook that they wished I was the governor or one of the senators of Florida, and I was like, no. Politics is not for me. I'm an introvert. Yeah. I work alone most of the day for my job, and I am fine with that. Yeah. I'm good with just being introspective and thinking all day. And so I would not consider running for a position, but I like to just be the person who doesn't stop holding up the climate shake sign and doesn't stop calling their representatives, "Hi, this is me again." So I'm just the kind of the quiet pusher, I'd say.
Well, what do you have a message for people that are watching today? Do you have something that if they're just watching this last little bit, what would you tell them to
Mm.
do or to take out of this conversation?
Mm. I would just say what Greta Thunberg would say: no one is too small to make a difference. In that we as individuals have so much capacity to influence others in a good way. And so I really like the idea of the butterfly effect, which is that very, very, very small, minute changes can change everything. And so I hope to maybe inspire people to get involved and just like pursue a passion you care about and just give it your all, because like you have one life and you can contribute as much to this society and to this world as you want. And so just like don't be afraid to just go all in and yeah, put yourself out there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and talking about your personal passion and why you're a climate activist. I think everybody has that ability to do that, to be one small piece of the larger puzzle. And I just want to bring inspiration to every single person that's willing to watch and listen and learn through other stories. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, thank you all so much for your time. Tune in for the next video, and I love and appreciate all of you. So, good night. Bye.
Bye.